Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. Wanted to thank everybody who's hopped on here in the past and who's here today to catch your battery basics. Just wanted to kind of brush up on a few things here and throw out some basic things to know about your batteries. For starters, I want to hop in and thank our sponsors. We got all the links are on our page. So if you would, if you're looking for a guide, check out Jeremy Gravon. His link is on there as well. If you're looking for good used boats, good family-owned business up here, the guys at Great Wakes can help you out, as well as the other tags that we have on here for our sponsors. So take a minute and check those guys out. Really appreciate their continued support. So if you have any questions, you can get me at bj@askboatdoc.com. Any questions here? You can also hop in here on this video over here in the live chat window here. And if you got any questions, I'd be happy to answer your questions here. So on to battery basics. So with the season underway here, we're really guys are getting out, water's warm, fishing, skiing's all kicking off really well right now. We've got a great summer ahead of us. Lakes are all full, rivers are full and flowing, salmon are running, fish are getting caught everywhere. So guys are going to see that potentially your battery ends up failing you out on the water. So basically there are two main types of batteries that get used. There's a cranking battery. These are 12 volt group 24 size batteries, which are your standard size, just like your automotive battery. The difference here is the design of a cranking battery and its purpose, and the design of a true deep cycle battery and its purpose. And what you may run into with a charging issue or a battery failure. So, or battery drop, voltage drops, continued drops in voltage, or continued draws on the battery and it not able to withstand that amount of draw. So what it comes to is your main cranking battery, typically the one that we sell the most of, is a group 24 marine cranking battery that has a bare minimum of 800 cold cranking amps. The battery that I sell out of here is 950 cranking amps, and that's cold cranking amps. That is a rating with the battery is rated for 950 amps draw during cold weather and a cold engine. That battery will throw its entire life, 12 volts, solid cranking, 950 cranking amps. Now, those types of batteries, a true cranking battery, does not have an amp hour rating because the plates, the internal design of a cranking battery is designed to throw a large jolt of voltage at initial demand and the motor start, whatever you're using, the motor fires up, and then there's no more draw on that battery. It then recovers with your alternator that's charging back to it. The typical outboard requires a minimum of 700 cranking amps as per manufacturer. So your 4-stroke outboards that are out there, they require a minimum of a 700 cold cranking amp battery in order to turn them. The older motors in the repair manuals stated somewhere in the range of a minimum of 550 to 600 cold cranking amps. Those tend not to really have enough juice to fire up an old 2-stroke Mercury that requires it to turn over for 30-40 seconds before it fires up. So that's why we throw the 950 cold cranking amp batteries at them. They're the same price as your lower cranking amp battery, and the motors tend to fire up much easier. We don't have as much strain on the starters when you have enough juice to turn it over. So if we were to try or attempt to hook up a deep cycle battery, say you went to town and picked up a multi-purpose RV marine deep cycle battery. The dual purpose RV marine deep cycle is not a true deep cycle battery. So a true deep cycle battery does not have a cranking amp rating on it. A true deep cycle battery has an amp hour rating. So those lead plates are basically, they're designed to have a continuous draw over a period of time, and that the voltage does not fall off as drastic as, say, your cranking battery does. Now, those batteries are designed, once you have that continuous draw on those batteries, and it over time, it'll pull the voltage down. Those batteries are designed to recover. You put a charger on them, whether it's a solar panel or something that puts voltage back into the battery. If you're hooked up to a trolling motor that is electric start and has charging capabilities, a kicker motor, whatnot, you're typically going to be putting, 10 to 16 amps at 12 volts back into it. Some of the outboards will run like a 32 amp charging system on them. Most of the outboards that are out there run a stator driven charging system. So at idle, they're producing a 12 volt, 16 amp charge. At higher RPMs, it produces a 12 volt up to 32 amps on the charge coil side of that stator. Now, that will suffice with keeping your deep cycle battery live and charged and whatnot, if that's how you have it hooked up. Now, keep in mind, your main engine, depending on what year it is also running a stator charge coil system on there. Now, the only thing with the boat motor that's running the stator system, the only thing the battery is used for is quite literally for starting. That engine produces its own electricity, its own voltage, its own spark, the whole stuff. It does not require battery connection in order to run the motors that have a charging system or that have a stator system on them. Okay. Now, motors that have alternators on there, those alternators charge just like our cars do. So the alternators range from 55 amps to upwards of 65, 70 amp alternators. Um, the difference between a stator and an alternator is the stator produces electricity via the flywheel and magnets. It's a magneto type system. As magnets pass over weights on the stator, the positive and negative field, the higher the RPM, the more electricity is produced. And it goes through a voltage regulator that takes the alternating current that's produced from the charging coil out of your stator and breaks it down to a DC current and regulates it so that it does not overcharge your battery. Okay. With an alternator, belt driven alternator off of your, say, newer 4-stroke outboard, some of the 2-strokes actually ran an alternator on them as well in the later models, 2000s, late 90s. There was Mercury had their EFI models actually ran an alternator that was up there. Now the alternators do not have a separate voltage regulator in them. An alternator takes internally, it has the regulator built into it. It has an excite coil. It produces its own electricity. It doesn't get its electricity from a stator system. So that alternator, the internal regulator, will regulate your amount of voltage, which on a 12-volt system, it's typically throwing 13 to 14.6 on the voltage output. And the amperage on an alternator system is much higher than your stator-driven regulated system. So your amperage with an alternator typically runs between 55 and 65 to 70 amps on your alternators, which will charge your battery much quicker. Now, let's say our application for batteries, we're running, say we have 2 batteries in a boat, and we've got your cranking battery is hooked up, obviously, to your engines, okay? And then you've got a battery switch, a battery isolator switch that will take the, you have the ability to hook all your accessories up to your deep cycle battery, which is designed for long continuous draws of electricity. So your accessories, let's say your fish finder, your live well pumps, your downriggers are all hooked up through a deep cycle battery, which is isolated via a battery isolator switch. So I can start the boat, start either one of the motors off of my cranking battery. If I need to charge my deep cycle battery, I can switch my isolator switch over to both, so I can start and my voltage will flow to both batteries in order to charge and fill both batteries back up on full voltage. The difference between, so not all batteries are created equally. Lithium, the new lithium-based batteries, those are completely different designs. They don't have lead in them. Lead is not used at all. It's a lithium-based battery. They hold a much more efficient and longer lasting battery for all purposes. Now, lithium takes a special type of charger. It takes it's a completely different style, completely different setup of a battery. Now, we also, back over to standard batteries are what we're dealing with. Your standard lead acid battery, that's what you're going to find. Now, you have lead acid, you have AGM, and you have a gel cell battery. In the marine application, the gel batteries are not, we don't see the performance and the life expectancy out of the gel batteries. just don't, in my experience, I have not seen a gel cell battery last nearly as long as your standard lead acid battery. The reason behind that is that typically the hours of usage and the amount of charge that gets put back into the batteries, it does not sustain the gel cell battery. Unless you're using your boat all the time and it's hooked up as your main and it's run through your alternating system, then that right there would we may see some longer life expectancies out of those Optima batteries or whatnot. But what I've found over the years is that our standard deep cycle and standard marine cranking battery, which is standard lead acid batteries, we get upwards of, shoot, I've got batteries that have been in my boat for 10 years and that are still live and still good. The biggest cause of a failure of a lead acid battery is the there's, say, over the winter time, there was something that was on, even your stereo that was left on. The clock on your stereo over 6 or 8 months will draw a battery completely dead. Now, when lead acid batteries get drawn completely dead and they sit with 0 volts in them, what happens is the lead actually penetrates and soaks in, or the acid actually penetrates the lead plates and soaks in to the lead plates. That the ions inside the battery no longer have the ability to hold a charge when those lead plates are penetrated. Okay. And the way to keep those standard lead acid battery alive through the winter time is to have some sort of battery tender. It does not have to be a huge voltage charger going at it. The difference between a charger and a tender is typically the amount of amperage that's thrown into the battery. Now, if anybody's charged a battery at home, you probably one time or another have left it on, say, fast charge, putting 50 or 60 amps at the battery, walked away from it and came back 3, 4, 5 hours later, and you can smell rotten eggs. And basically what that is the acid is actually boiling because those lead plates, now that you've thrown so much voltage at it for a length of time, those lead plates have gotten so hot that it's pushed all the acid out of them, and you're boiling the acid out of it. Now, when a battery actually boils like that, if you overcharge them for a length of time, when you boil anything, it turns into a vapor, and then you'll end up you'll evaporate some of the acid off of the top of the plate. So then internally in that battery, the top, so much of the lead plates are exposed now, and that eliminates the capacity for that lead plate to store any more energy, because now the acid is not touching all of the plates. In turn, what will happen is from that acid or the lead will slough off, and the positive and negative plates that are inside the battery end up touching each other, and that's how you get what's called a dead cell, and then your battery's no good. So sometimes people will find that they go out to their car after a really cold winter, really cold night or something. They go and start their car and it fires up fine the first time. They drive it down the road to the store, they shut it off, go inside, whatever you're doing, come back out to go to start your car, and your battery's dead. Well, say you jump it or have somebody help you out and get your car started again, and it works fine for the next 3, 4, 5 weeks, and then your battery's dead. What that is one of one of your cells or more of your cells are actually are dead cells. They're shorting out internally in the battery, and when you go to fire it up, it no longer has the ability to throw the voltage at it. So the way you keep these batteries live throughout the wintertime or any length of time is a battery tender. Any major marine manufacturer that's out there, marine stores, RV stores, whatnot, will sell battery tenders, onboard battery chargers that can be wired in and plugged in at night at home. You can go to your local Batteries Plus stores or something and pick up your alligator clip, plug into the wall, 5-amp battery tender. What that'll do is it will put 5 amps, 12 volt, 5 amp of voltage into that battery until it reaches its floating level, which is full voltage and full capacity without boiling the acid. And then the charger or the tender will periodically, they will turn back on and they'll test. They do an internal test all automatically, and it will keep a float level floating voltage at full capacity throughout storage time. So the standard practice here when we're done, like say we're winterizing a boat or whatnot, and we've fully drained everything, we've got everything fogged, everything's ready to go, disconnected, and we wash the boat up, we disconnect the batteries and recommend to all the customers that they put a tender or they pull the battery out of the boat and place it in their garage. And one thing you definitely do not want to do is place a battery on the concrete floor and attempt to charge it. So what that does is the ground concrete will actually cause a draw naturally to that battery. So you never ever want to place a battery on concrete or metal that's touching the ground. You always want to place it on a piece of wood, on a pallet, on your workbench, something to that nature. And that way where it's stored at is off of the ground. And it lessens the ability or the possibilities of draining that battery, having a parasitic draw off of that battery just naturally from the concrete and off of the ground. Now, you charge the battery or tend the battery, you never want to put a large voltage charge at a battery for a length of time. So if I'm tending on the battery, like I said, I will hook up a battery tender that has a low amperage input and a floating ability, so that once the battery has reached its capacity, it will float and it will tend and maintain that battery throughout the wintertime. Temperatures affect batteries in major ways. The cold winter nights and extended cold without having some sort of tender back at a battery will wipe a battery out. Hot days, I haven't seen the heat actually affect a battery. What I do see is guys, once again, same example I gave you, is if you went out in the middle of winter time and fired your car up, it started fine. You went to the store, shut it off, come out and your battery's dead. Well, same idea happens when guys fire their boats up at home and didn't confirm that both batteries, if they're equipped with two, were actually full and capable of maintaining good voltage. They go to the lake, they forgot to shut the battery switch off, they go to fire it up and the batteries are dead. Well, that just tells me that it had enough juice from when you turned the battery on to fire the boat, and it didn't run long enough with the alternator to charge to capacity. So when you got to the lake, they were dead because you left the battery switch on and there wasn't enough storage capabilities in those batteries. So with that being said, I would, if you have any questions, I'd love to steer you in the right direction with which batteries to purchase for your boat, how to test them, and the proper way to load test a battery, as well as setting up an electrical system in your boat with battery switches, cutoff switches, and kicker motors, trolling motors that can be tied in through your charging system off of your main. There's a lot of different options that are out there, and there's a lot of outlets that we can set you up for hassle-free and worry-free boating. That's ultimately what we're all in this game for, is to get out on the water and make sure that we have a good time with it. So on that note, if there's no questions here, I want to make sure that we thank our sponsors. And if you have any questions whatsoever, please reach out to me at bj@askboatdoc.com. I hope this information was helpful to you. And once again, everybody stay safe, stay dry, and let's have a great summer. We'll catch you later. Do appreciate it.